everybody, to yet another conversation session at the ABLE Annual Meeting 2021. It is my pleasure to moderate two of those sessions today, and we are starting out with the team from Bloomfield College, Nora McCook, and Nixon Cleofa, who are talking about storytelling as exploration. What can ePortfolio practitioners learn from first-generation college student stories? Over to you.
So welcome. So we have a presentation and a little bit of activity for us this afternoon, but I'm presuming that everybody's in the same time zone. So thank you for joining us this time. And we are from Bloomfield College in Bloomfield, New Jersey. And so our theme is storytelling as exploration. What can ePortfolio practitioners learn from first-generation college students' stories? My colleagues, Dr. Nora McCook, Dr. Nixon Cleopa, myself, and our team members, I believe they're here. I'd like to share their names as well: Leah Brown Johnson, Melissa Faulkner, and Andrew Garsmeyer. So next slide. And my apologies for the noise in the background. There's a bit of singing happening, I guess, in celebration. So our conversation objectives for today. First, we like to sit together with student stories from pilot first year ePortfolios. To let us imagine a new ePortfolio that responds to student stories. Then we would like to consider applications with ePortfolios in your program. So here's our framing question for us. How can building from the ground up with student stories create a more equitable and responsive approach to ePortfolio with our first generation college students? So my colleague will take it from here. Thank you.
Great. One kind of like context thing is that Bloomfield College is part of the Institute on ePortfolios that's been happening since January. So we're really excited to be members of that project. But you can see that the tagline at our college is write your own story. And one of the reasons that we're here at ABLE and that we ended up getting involved with the Institute on ePortfolios is because of the moment that we're in at our college and in our community. So just as my own little mini story here, I was at the 2019 Forum on Digital Learning and ePortfolios, and which actually was the last in-person conference I attended. But and there was a session from two institutions that had introduced ePortfolios while they were undergoing general education redesign. And so I was really thinking about how ePortfolios can provide opportunity and not a barrier when you're kind of going through a lot of change at an institution. So just a little bit of context for why we got into this particular approach to looking at the ePortfolios. First of all, we're really new. So we're new to the field. We're new to our own ePortfolio. We've done this for about a year as a group that's sort of a cross-section of faculty and folks working in student services, career center, and even technology. So we do not actually have a mandate from our school to implement ePortfolios or do anything in particular other than make use of this year-long institute that we're a part of and hopefully demonstrate the value of ePortfolios. So we introduced ePortfolio last fall, and in addition to the pandemic and everything, there were a lot of changes happening in our leadership, some finalizing of a revised mission and strategic plan. The structure of units on campus have changed, and more recently we've had a slew of retirements. So just a lot of kind of things are in flux at the campus. And one of the questions that I really was interested in asking is, can we use ePortfolios to invite students to have an additional voice at the table during this time of change? So this is just a visual that my colleague Nixon provided of some of our student leaders and also our administration down at the bottom, who, President Evans has been here, this is our third year, our dean has been here 2 years, and then we also kind of, have an outgoing dean as well. So that kind of captures a little bit of the flux that this image is already out of date since yesterday, or when we added this slide. So just a little bit of context. I don't want to spend too much time because I really want us to have a lot of time to look at the stories that we wanted to share with you all from our students and kind of process really with each other here at this conference. But we began this initiative as a multi-course process learning ePortfolio. We're using Google Sites, and we've restricted access to the ePortfolios to just individuals with Bloomfield College email addresses, and really only those are things that students would share with them directly. But the audiences for this is really for first year ePortfolios, for the students themselves, their peers, their instructors. And so we are also starting to transition them to sending their ePortfolio to their academic advisor. And so that will be happening for this cohort of students this coming fall. The overarching goals of the pilot are kind of low balls. So to familiarize students and instructors with ePortfolios and really to assess and build. And so we designed an ePortfolio with Google Sites that just has like the student's name, or they put their name in and it says like, Nora's Bloomfield story. And then they have a college and career journey page, writing my story page, and creating my story page that sort of aligns with the 3 courses that we have implemented the portfolio with for first year courses. So a little bit of a snapshot of the student population last fall. So we had, this is of the whole college, we were about 50%, half of the campus African-American, almost a third Hispanic, majority eligible for Pell Grants, and half were first-generation college students. So we had some learning outcomes, and in respect to the Institute, I developed these before we were a part of the Institute. So these are definitely up for revision. But, the idea was to really build on the appeal of portfolios for, professionalization, but to also really emphasize the role of reflection and the uses of reflection. So we have, we want to kind of get into, and I'm going to turn it over in a moment to my colleague to talk about some of the questions we have, but we want to actually share with you one of the components of the portfolio that we've been collecting for a study that we're doing. And I'll talk more about that when we get into the activity. But we have 3 stories we want to share and just really talk through what we're seeing in these stories. So with that, I'll let Nixon kind of set this up.
So as we're about to read some of the stories of our students, and those of you who actually have worked with ePortfolio before, those of you who are thinking of using ePortfolio, we have a couple of questions that we would like you to keep in mind. Feel free to use the chat or use the microphone to speak. And one of the questions is, how can we use ePortfolios to guide revisions to the first year initiative? For me, first year initiative would not only be the institution or the institutionalization of ePortfolio at Bloomfield College, but even the first year seminar that we have at Bloomfield, which I coordinate. And I have to say, after reading through some of the stories of our students, there's so many things that I am reconsidering in that first year SEM. And the other day, even though the coding assignment will not be part of this, but as we were doing coding for each of the storylines that we read, we realized that we were being transformed pedagogically while we were reading the stories of our students. So there's so much for us. Like for me personally, there's so much that I find ePortfolio to be a guide, especially when it comes to be a space for students to actually tell their own story. So we definitely would love for you to keep this question in mind. How can we use ePortfolios to guide revisions to the first year initiative? Yes. So the second question is, what can ePortfolio practitioners learn from first generation college students? So no, I don't know if you want us to go very quickly around the room and have people maybe answer this question or give their feedback in terms, even if you have not used ePortfolio, as a future ePortfolio practitioners, what would you like your student to teach you based on the stories that they will share with you on ePortfolio?
I'm absolutely happy to open that up. That sounds like a great question. If anybody has thoughts already.
Who is working with first generation college students besides the folks at Bloomfield College?
I have two statements. Oh, would you like us to answer the questions, or are you waiting? I know we have a lot of first year students at Bloomfield College. And one of the things that we are trying to learn, how do you manage or even consider those stories in communities? And consider those stories as stories that are equal regardless of where people come from. So this idea of equity.
So some comments coming in the chat. I see Julian asks, how are they managing the transition to academia? Jennifer says, I would love to know how we can make the application registration process easier for first gen students. Steve says, how did they manage college, or how did they imagine college before starting? And how have their understandings changed in first year? And Peter, everyone has a story, none more important than others. So hearing the stories of first generation students are consistent with providing equity, access, and inclusion on campus. Storytelling is a critical life skill. Emily, so I see how fast you all are typing now. Emily adds, I think it's always helpful to hear where students are coming from to better understand them and how to serve them. And Amy's offered, what are they seeing as the most significant experiences in their first year? What are they drawing from these experiences?
Yeah. So there was one question about what did students think about college before they got there. I guess through reading their autobiography, intellectual autobiography assignment, we find a lot of our students, some of them were thinking about college and what it would look like. And a lot of them were not thinking about college before they got to Bloomfield. But what we find out, even though there were some who had an idea of what college would look like, but the whole experience for everyone seemed to have been an eye-opening, especially when they tell their story. So even the ones who actually thought that's how college would be, even in the process of using ePortfolio, they are realizing that they are not just college students, but they are individuals who are getting ready for a career, or individuals who might be dedicated their lives to be academics. So for a lot of them, college is something that it's a big surprise, even to those who actually knew or probably thought that college was going to be something that their high school counselors or advisors talked to them about.
And Jennifer's added here again, I'd like to know what they perceive as supporting factors and what they perceive as barriers and challenges. Really, really great question. And I think a really good one that we'll be able to find in ePortfolios, actually.
Mm-hmm. I think I mean, my experience, I don't know if any of Leah's not here, but I taught first year SAM, I taught one of the sections. I think the space itself is a very supportive mechanism for people who never been given a space, or even for students whose voices were not considered important. by the virtue of having a page that they call ePortfolio, something that that can be used for professional reasons, I find that a lot of students were very excited to actually post their stories, to actually tell their stories. And then, of course, the support that they receive from their classmates, because in many of our sections, we have them do peer reviewing, and then give positive feedback. So the whole notion of community, I thought this helped them. And in that regard, learning was not just something that only the instructor or the professor empowered the students with, but learning became a community happening. It became a community event than just like someone sitting in the classroom and tell them what to do. Some of the barriers I noticed is because they're freshmen, and I'm just talking about the first year SEM, because they're freshmen, there was a struggle of knowing what is professional and what is not professional. For example, in terms of what kind of picture should I put on my e-portfolio page? Should I, color my resume green, use green font or whatever? So that was a barrier or challenge that a lot of them had to face. I don't know anything else. Anyone else from this group would like to share their experience with students using ePortfolio in this regard?
Yeah, so I've put up a question that I think will lead us in the next slide to looking at some stories and diving into that. But yeah, I love the questions that folks have raised here, and have already even gotten more specific about some of the things that looking at ePortfolios from some of the campuses that that several of us in this room here are teaching in. What they might be teaching us about the college experience, about how they may or may not be feeling heard or feeling supported, or as Jennifer says, they are feeling like they've found some support. So if anybody has anything they want to unmute and then jump in on, I'll wait for a moment and then we'll transition quickly so we have time to look at some stories and see what that generates. And feel free, as always, to jump into the chat with anything else. So we've started to really think about using ePortfolios that we did with this pilot, which again was a pretty low kind of, let's get some ePortfolio out there and incorporate some assignments that we're already assigning and see what we have. So we want to now look at what we have and think about, where do we see from these ePortfolios as one set of data. Students might be kind of showing us some of the possibilities we might not have originally come to creating the ePortfolio to support. So Nixon has mentioned, but as a team, we've started a process of coding a subset of the ePortfolios to sort of identify some of the topics, such as barriers, such as support, which some of you have mentioned. But here in this meeting, in this conversation session, we really want to kind of zoom out and see, what are these stories telling us about what students might be wanting from ePortfolios? So we don't have the answers. This is not an activity as a team that we've actually done. So we're kind of taking a little bit, like one of the assignments that we've seen has really interested in us as we're coding the ePortfolios and kind of bringing it here to the table. So we have 3 stories that we're going to share with you, and really we're truly hoping to collaborate. And we invite all of you who have a lot more experience than we do with ePortfolios and possibly with storytelling to bring that experience and kind of see what is interesting. So I do have a Jamboard that I thought could be a nice kind of open-ended space for us to spend about 10 or 15 minutes here actually just reading through the ePortfolio stories that I have, which are on these slides. So if you pull up the Jamboard, there's a circle that has a tiny URL, and those are the slides that I'm sharing right now. And so I've pasted the ePortfolio stories into the slides. So if you want to take a moment and see if you can navigate there and let me know if I can, I'll grab the link as well. But basically, the Jamboard will just be a space, and you guys can. We were going to see if you guys want to do breakout rooms, but we're kind of like running a little bit close on time, so I don't know if we want to like jump into breakout rooms and process that and then come back. So feel free with the Jamboard. Maybe choose your own Jamboard frame, and we invite you guys to add like quotes from the stories. Or images that come to mind as you are reading through these student stories, or just really anything. The questions I have up on the slide can be frames as we start to think about what we might want to pay attention to from the stories. But again, we invite you to go beyond what we've provided here. I think some of the questions in the chat offer some really important things we might be able to ask of these stories. So let me go ahead. Does anybody need me to throw the link to the slides here in the chat? Would that be helpful? All right, so please take your time here. And Bloomfield folks, we can jump in this as well, but we'll take until at least like 3:35. I apologize. What are we in Pacific time? 12:35. To just spend a little bit of time reading these e-portfolios, and we'll kind of go over some of the doodles or thoughts that we've added to the Jamboard right around 12 or 3:35.
Yeah, Peter asked a question, and the question was, if at all, did mental health issues factor in here? Many students struggle in their first year, which can impact engagement and participation. I mean, in the stories we read, I would say yes, absolutely, especially during COVID. And interesting enough, I wonder if we started this in person, how different it would have been, because a lot of students were working remotely. So absolutely, I think one of the reasons we did not make this a requirement, we actually took into account that not only this was the first time students were being exposed to ePortfolio, but we were also dealing with COVID. So absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's really interesting to think about how students might be sharing information about that. I think one of the terms I saw repeated over and over again was motivation. Both on both sides of it, right? Was it something that was a barrier? Was it something that they felt like they were proud of? But it was definitely something they were very aware of. And out of the sample of e-portfolios that we've started looking at a little more closely, that was just a term that just really stood out to me as something that was a very important one for them. And, and a lot of that had to do with a conversation about, even evaluating the course or the faculty, right? Like, did they feel that the faculty member was motivated or was motivating? So that was one area where I started thinking about what you've asked, Peter.
Yeah, and then in one of the assignments, I think a lot of students, many of them reported that one of the things they need to work on is time management. And I think what they were saying, they had a hard time completing tasks on time. But we saw that theme, time management. If there's anything I need to improve on, it would be time management. So, and it wasn't just one student saying that, many of them were saying time management. I just take that as if they were struggling with, getting the assignments done. And even as faculty working on this, and because everything was online, it's not just students being, affected. I was tired. I was tired of looking at all of these folders, right? So if I were tired, if I was tired, I would assume that students, I cannot even imagine being a freshman, my first year in college, I have to spend it online. So yeah.
So I think I might go ahead, if you guys don't mind, share the screen, and so we can just kind of look through some of the doodles that you added. as I'm pulling that up, does anybody mind us landing on your doodle frame or your Jamboard first? Anybody mind volunteering? I think this is the first kind of chronologically. So, and feel free to jump in and add things, whether this is your doodle or inklings or not. So somebody saw a common thread of community and pride in where they came from. Sometimes you hear from colleagues and administrators that essentially disrespect our students' backgrounds. Academics occasionally think it's our job to move our students out of their homes, cultures, communities, families in order for them to succeed. And that is an elitist, narrow worldview. Our students are proud of where they come from. They love their families, their neighborhoods, their cultures. As academics, we should share their pride and encourage them to go back and contribute to the betterment of their homes, whatever that may look like. I love that perspective. And I will say, one of my hopes in really in implementing ePortfolios at Bloomfield College is that we do get to see more of our students. You know, I think they often, I'm a writing instructor, and so I think, you know, we often see a lot of things kind of come into writing in places that surprise us. And ePortfolio really is a place where that background, those connections are very safe and welcome. So. And I want us to be able to make it even more so. So I think this is a fantastic observation about that sense of pride, and that, you know, how many of these stories kind of start with identity and start with the neighborhood even. What other thought? Any other? Did anybody see something kind of similar to this, or kind of have a different take on this area of observation? I really am curious too if ePortfolios are a space for you know, faculty to really reframe how we understand our students. So, okay. So another person says these students have very definite goals. They see themselves doing something meaningful and satisfying. That's really interesting. So they kind of are coming in with some ideas for where they want to be. And thanks for the joining in the chat. So Jennifer says, I'm also a writing instructor, and the community pride comes into their writing quite often. It's lovely. Yeah. And I think this is an interesting little snapshot of the types of goals that students have across, you know, different majors, different interests, how they're building those interests and thinking about looking ahead. And then this one looks really interesting. So definitely took up the doodle challenge with this frame. So yeah, I hesitate to want to interpret this. Does anybody want to chime in on what this is representing? I feel like on the right was sort of like that student identifying as African American and is it Puerto Rican and Honduran. So kind of, yeah, representing themselves in those three identities. The story about the hospital, softball, New Jersey, and then our music producer, who in 5 years is going to be a music producer in New York City. So kind of, yeah, really, I love that that's sort of like, you know, an impression of the student just based on reading the stories, and it may be kind of cutting across community connection dreams.
Mm-hmm. Whoever wrote that, Noah, do you know who this is? So this is so powerful, this image. Who wrote it? or who created
want to
it?
come forward?
Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yes. So there are a few other questions or statements. So Peter said, struggling with the gym board, found students focused, reflective, mature, passionate, and inspiring. Absolutely. And not just inspiring, well, for me, inspiring in a way to be a better teacher or better professor. Um, and also I feel very humble, having access to read their stories. It's one thing to give an assignment that's going to be graded. It's another thing just to read the story for the sake of the story. So what I found it that was so empowering to me as a professor and also inspiring to me is that I'm reading this story. I'm like, oh, even though I probably graded this assignment, but I never took the story as the story when I had to grade it. So it's interesting how we have different focus. So for me, it's like as an instructor, when I'm reading student stories, I think it really pushes me to read the story with a lot of care and not just as an item that I need to grade. And that's what our reflective practice in working with the coding aspect of this, it just pushed me to think beyond the story as an artifact that needs to be graded.
So I apologize if you can hear the lawnmower outside. I'm gonna look through the next frames and see if there's anything else. And I do want us to transition at the end to sort of talk about like this process and if there's anything we learn from looking at ePortfolios in this particular manner that offers a tool for us as practitioners, and whether or not it does what we were asking. If we are able to sort of listen to our first generation college students and build ePortfolios, if we can try to close that feedback loop with this type of exercise, or if there's a next step we can imagine. So I want to see what other ways people interpreted this, and so I'm gonna guess that's a Jamboard test. So somebody says, I see a lot of hope and clarity in regards to their individual goals, diversity and community, self-awareness. Pride in their community, stayed in the area. Recognition of challenges they may face or have faced, and a really nice little infographic here with a ladder, a figure climbing, with Bloomfield with success, and then clear goals. 3 students are confident in the Bloomfield educational system. 3 students chose different in their career choices. Striking to me that all 3 students have strong sense of their major and career path. Is this typical of Bloomfield students? How specific are the prompts that led to these stories? And I'll hold 1 second because I know Nixon can add to that. Those are great questions. Mature, reflective. And thank you all for diving in with the Jamboard. This is really cool to see how you've started to think about these stories. And this one is mine, but I was just sort of taking notes on a couple of them with the father, the student who thought A+ were going to be the way to go, be successful in 5 years, but then also change the music industry with proper skills from college. So some really powerful statements there, and some ones that just really stood out as an instructor, like, oh, can we live up to this? So fantastic.
No, there were a few comments in the chat, and we've been, I guess the notice is that we have 10 more minutes left, so.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, this is where we step back. So we have looked at some stories. We welcome any thoughts. I saw a lot of people kind of seeing some common threads. A good question about, did these students seem kind of like driven? I will say that the sample had a little bit of bias to students who had, it was biased in that it was students who completed the e-portfolio, which I think does sort of limit it to students who are a little more, especially in that remote learning semester, kind of on top of things. And I do think that that probably also correlated a little bit to students who maybe had a really clear purpose. Like they came into college, they knew what they wanted to do, and the remote learning thing and the e-portfolio we threw at them like did not put them off their stride. So I do think, you know, in general, there's some stronger students, but we do have a lot of, you know, like everybody, we have strong degrees that students are interested in, nursing being one of them. And so, you know, we do have students who come into Bloomfield specifically for that. But the question about the prompt, Nixon, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So this assignment was asking them to think of their intellectual career while they're at Bloomfield. So it's called an intellectual autobiography. So as freshmen, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And going back, I think a lot of CAT students, as you said, a lot of nursing students know exactly. I think one of the students a nursing major, I believe. So CAT students in nursing tend to be very focused on, you know, not that the other students are not, but they kind of know they came to Bloomfield for. It was in the first year SEM. Okay, so where do you want this to go? Do you want people to share more of their experience, or do we want to talk about this Ethia that we have equity, community connection? I think in the one, the beautiful art design, talk about connection and also community and flexibility. I mean, did we see those assignments meeting the ethos of one of the ethia of ePortfolio, which is flexibility? I mean, in my head, I think it does. That I associate that assignment because it allows them to come from wherever they, you know, whatever their family background is. And someone said earlier that students are very proud of their heritage, and that is true. They are very proud, and it's, you know, sometimes we take that for granted. And one of the things they had to do in that assignment is actually to talk about where they come from, where they are going, and where they see themselves going. That was the 3 components of that particular assignment. Now, in terms of equity, I would think ePortfolio helps that because everyone was given the place to share their story,
well,
regardless.
Let's open it up a little bit. You guys have heard a lot from us, but I'm very interested. I mean, you know, how do we go from these stories, you know, and try to think about what does an equitable ePortfolio now look like, given some of the topics that I wasn't expecting, you know, disclosing a learning disability, talking about, alluding to like not having a father figure. So what does an ePortfolio look like, or what could we do with this? Is there anything that we think we can use from this process for ourselves? And then, you know, does this map onto other institutions? Is this a way to start to, again, get out of some of the modes that we look at ePortfolios in as instructors or administrators and kind of think about, you know, are there new possibilities here that we can be looking to stories to guide us to? Yes, Charlotte, thank you for raising your hand.
I'm wondering is what were the prompts that you used, because the students were really honest, and they didn't hold back. So what were the prompts that you asked in your portfolio to get back the answers that you received?
I can post the prompt in the chat. You can see what it was like, but I'm gonna look for it in the syllabus and post it on.
Thank you.
in the
Yeah,
class.
I'm just shocked on, they were wonderful. And also they have so much, I mean, for me, I almost, I think teaching is a privilege, but I can't, but after reading this, I realized, and I always know there's a responsibility, but if I read all of them, I would just like want to crawl under a rock or something, because the responsibilities of what they believed in and how confident they were in Bloomfield was almost scary to me. I don't know. Did anyone else find that?
Thank you so much for that. And I see, oh no, now I can't see your name.
It's me, I guess, Steve.
Now I
I
see
just,
your name.
I mean, I'm not haven't been as involved in ePortfolio on our campus yet, but I want to learn, and I teach first year writing. It seems to me that what these students express, if that could be reconnected with semester after semester, not only for the students to keep looking at their goals and their progress and changes that happen and struggles, but that faculty and advisors do as well. Because too often I think students just take isolated courses and the faculty just respond and grade, and they may do it in a very kind and supportive way, but they may not know these stories, and they may not know, well, this student is doing very well or very poorly in my whatever class, but how does that fit into the bigger picture of their journey? And if we had that kind of insight, maybe that would be helpful. And asking the students, well, how's it going now? How's it going in this class? Do you see a connection? Are you frustrated? Are you getting there?
Thank you so much. And I saw Jennifer suggested to maybe having them use these stories to start thinking about their brand or professional identity, which is a really cool ePortfolio direction that I've been seeing a lot at the conference and talking about professional online presences and things like that. So really one just final question, does this at all apply to context? I know you guys have been so wonderfully helpful for us, but the idea was that this could, we're curious if this is a model that can be transferred. I know we're not the only, folks who've been coding ePortfolios or even co-creating ePortfolios with students, but is there anything here you guys think you could take away and use as a process for your own institutions? And then I know we're pretty much at the end here, so if there's any final thoughts you have about that, and no is fine, but that was something we were curious about from this conversation. And so Jennifer, you asked what are we hoping to glean from the coding process? So we are really trying to look at topics that have been discussed. And so what are the kind of themes or topic coding that students have really incorporated into all of these stories and other aspects of the portfolio. And then we're trying to figure out another way of kind of where are students doing something that is really more like evaluative? Are they engaging with some sort of connection across courses? Are they, or between course and home? Are they thinking about? I just lost what I was going to say. Just reflective practice. I forget. I have my research questions pulled up, but I don't want to jump over there right here at the end. But yeah, we started just doing topics just to sort of kind of have a way to go through and try to label this. And we just have learned so much from realizing that some of our labels, like professional or academic, some of those things were sort of breaking down with the way students were seeing that. So so that in and of itself has just been really a productive project for our team, but it does take a lot of time. So it's something we kind of wanted to pitch here to see what you all thought. So thank you all very much. I know we're here and Christina's posted the evaluation. So thanks so much for sticking with us and hearing a little bit of some of the things that we're looking at and thinking about and how to sort of build from here. So and we're very happy to share and brainstorm further after the session in other platforms in Slack and otherwise. So thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Nora, Nixon, and Wai, for sharing the experiences that you've had with your first ePortfolio project and also as members of the AEC&EO ePortfolio Institute, and then how you could already incorporate some of that learning into your projects and what you have gained from the Institute after that and can take that into your future teaching and also research. It's been certainly fantastic to see those student examples and hear the students voice themselves very confidently in their identity and bringing in their community and where they want to go and really share about themselves. And thank you also to all the participants who doodled on the Jamboard, asked questions, and also shared their comments.